and the responsibilities that these children have in terms of pure survival it's so challenging for them. And it's challenging for me as someone who sits in the place of advocacy to ensure equity in their education, that no, they cannot come after school to make up a test. Or perhaps there might be an issue with attendance. Or we have to ensure that should they be eligible for free and reduced lunch, that is something that we support the families with.
Welcome to RBERNing Questions, a professional learning podcast where we answer your most compelling questions about teaching, serving, and supporting multilingual learners. I'm your host, Jasmine Coaxum, and through our talks, I look forward to bringing the methods, philosophies, and stories behind teaching multilingual learners to light. Let's get into the show. Dr. Denise Furlong is an assistant professor and director for literacy and multilingual programs at Georgian Court University in New Jersey. She has taught multilingual learners for over 25 years, ranging from grades K through 12. Her book, Voices of Newcomers, Experiences of Multilingual Learners, has been honored with 2 Educator Awards, and we're excited to have her on the show today to talk about the contents of this wonderful book. Okay, so welcome back to the RBERNing Questions podcast. And today's guest is Dr. Denise Furlong. And we are just going to dive right in, and I'm going to start talking about how I met you in order to bring you on to this podcast to begin with. And it was at the NICE TESOL conference last year in Albany is where we were, yeah. And I happened to be in the audience for your keynote speech. I believe it was the last day of the conference, right, for your keynote speech. And you said something very nice to me about my speech the previous night. And I was like, oh, that's so nice. Thank you. And I didn't know at the time when you were complimenting me that you were even really going to be the keynote. I hadn't realized that. And then I said, oh, she's the keynote. That's really great. So, Dr. Furlong, why don't you just tell us a little bit about your current position right now, your current role in education. But before you do that, first, I just want to say that the first line in your bio on Amazon states, Dr. Denise Furlong is currently working her dream job as a teacher educator for Georgian Court University in New Jersey. Now, not many people can say this at all, so please tell us about your current position and what makes it a dream.
First of all, shout out to NICE TESOL. Like, what an incredible organization and just an amazing conference. And I met so many great people like yourself. So, love NICE TESOL. And yeah, like I have wanted to become a teacher educator and assistant professor for so many years. And I think my pathway through K-12 in New Jersey really brought me here. And I'm here. I am the director of advanced programs for both reading specialists and candidates who are pursuing their ESL and bilingual bicultural endorsements. So it's really like kind of the, marriage of all my passions and all my worlds. So I just love it. I love working with just really passionate educators who want to kind of, learn more to better serve their students. So yeah, it's like Disney World here. Love it.
Mhm. Okay, great. So now what inspired you in the first place to become an educator of ELLs or MLs? What actually led you to the field of education to begin with before you got this dream position?
So many years ago, I was at the College of New Jersey, and I remember knowing that I was gonna be a teacher, and I went to, one of my majors, and in New Jersey, you have to have a double major, so one of my majors was elementary ed, and I remember thinking to myself, "What should my other content area major be?" And I was like, "Not math, not biology," and I was like, "You know what? I always loved Spanish." And my Spanish teacher, shout out to Brick High School, had said to me, "Denise, one day you're gonna be a Spanish teacher." And I said, "No, no, señora, I'm gonna be a physical therapist," which now I realize is a different form of teaching. But so I said, why don't I'll take Spanish as my second major. And that kind of started me on my pathway. When I graduated, I immediately thought to myself, okay, so how am I going to, kind of continue on for my master's degree? And that's when I saw Rutgers had a program that I remember saying to my parents at the time, because I was, back at home living with my parents. I said, if I could have written this program for myself, this is what I would have written. And I was reading the course descriptions, and this was to get my master's degree, to get my ESL and my bilingual endorsements. So, and that's what started me on my journey. And I did not stop for about 15 years taking classes, and I wound up getting my doctorate from Rutgers. But that moment where I saw, if I could have planned this for myself, this is what I would have planned, these courses. And I try to provide those moments for my students at Georgian Court as well. This is what is going to empower you. So, yeah, and then I was teaching the entire time, and I've taught at different parts of my career, every grade from K up to 12, and I just finished my public school career. I was teaching part-time at my old high school, and I was working with newcomers at the high school level, which has been so educational for me. So, yeah,
Mm.
always learning.
Okay, so you mentioned newcomers. Huh? So definitely that is an excellent lead into your latest book, which is Voices of Newcomers, Experiences of Multilingual Learners. So I'm just going to share a little bit of the book description from Amazon, which says that this is an easy to read guide for all teachers looking to meet the needs of multilingual learners, English learners, in particular, newcomers and SLIFE. Educators may feel intimidated, admitting that they need to learn more about ways to help their students. Here, they will find easy to implement and non judgmental support that busy teachers can put into place from the first moment they pick up the book. Now, I love that you've included this adjective non judgmental. Can you expand on why this particular adjective needed to be included? And then tell us a bit more about this book.
So I think a lot of times people think that it's only the novice teachers that should be asking questions, and it's only the people who are new to our profession who could admit that they don't know what to do. And I think having these conversations, and there's a number of districts who have used this as book club material, and having these discussions together to say, hey, I don't know everything. Why don't we kind of work together? And I could put myself in a vulnerable position to say, I need to learn. I need to learn. As teachers, we think we should be the experts, right? And like I just said, I was learning a ton from my high school, my secondary level newcomers. We need to be able to be vulnerable enough to say, I could learn from my students, I can learn from my colleagues, I can learn from other people in the field. And, it's like Maya Angelou, when you know better, you do better. And I think we can constantly keep learning and doing better. And I say non-judgmentally because, please, we should all be humble enough to know that there's so much more for all of us to learn.
And I think this has been a big shift in
Sure.
the field because, yes, a long time ago, that was it. It's like the teacher's the expert. They stand in front of the class, they feed you this information, and you're supposed to take that information in and then regurgitate it later on the test. And then
Exactly.
that's that, right? And so now it's a new ball game where we're noticing, yes, students have some valuable experiences that they can share and bring to the classroom to create a more powerful synergy in terms of learning in general. So I really like that you said that. Now, I'm just going to highlight a couple of the other things that the book does or provides, and then you can expand on any of that you would like to. So, some of the points are how to manage the first days and first weeks to assist their newcomers in adjusting academically, emotionally, socially to their new school and class. Then there's asset based perspectives on the progress of multilingual learners, information that will help teachers academically engage these students, in addition to ways to assess and motivate them, reflection questions and discussions for each chapter to guide book clubs or conversations in professional learning communities. I personally love that, reflection questions and discussions. And then ready to use resources are provided to support educators as they meet the needs of their MLs. Would you like to expand on any of those in terms of what the book has to offer for educators?
Sure. Over all my years in different districts and different positions, I found that a lot of times teachers, particularly if they don't share the language of their newcomers, if they don't speak those languages, are really intimidated. And they're like, I don't even know what to do with this child. This child showed up at my classroom door, and now what? And there's so much that we can do in terms of communication, in terms of support, in terms of even just helping this child through this probably, this huge transition in this child's life, and empowering our teachers to feel that they can and will make a positive difference for these children, whether or not they share a heritage language, it's really an important step. So the way to empower our students is to empower the teachers, and kind of giving them those tools and having those discussions and really talking about perhaps the perspective of the child would really be ways that teachers could better understand how they could help that child navigate this new world. I think sometimes we as human beings don't necessarily look past our own perspectives in things, and that's in education, that's, kind of globally. And for us to be really thinking about someone else's perception of what things are, that is really an important part of our journey if we're thinking about reflecting on our own biases, our own perspective, our own educational journey. So if we're talking about being culturally responsive, really those kind of reflections about other people's points of view, other people's perspectives, other people's experiences, that's got to be part of it. Sometimes when we don't consider what other people have gone through, that empathy just isn't there. So, yeah. So even like that user-friendly guide of how to engage and support these new students would be really helpful for teachers to feel that they could be successful in helping them.
Great. I think it's really timely. I mean, this work is really definitely timely as well. And I'm glad that you mentioned perspectives, because the part of the book's description then goes on to say that by amplifying the voices of these students, their families, and their teachers, this handbook includes real life stories to help educators understand these diverse perspectives, right? So, and then it goes on to say that this book is practical for educators of all ages who want to best empower their students to succeed. So, I'm wondering if you can give us an example of one of these real life stories that are included in this book.
So sure. And we talk about amplifying voices because sometimes as educators, we think, okay, our own perspective of what people should want is is what's most important. And that's not the case. As advocates, we really need to kind of find out what our students, their families, the communities, what they need and want rather than what our perspective is on what they should need and want, and amplifying those voices because those voices are powerful. Those voices are really representative of them and the community. So, really, really important to think about. So, when I think about different experiences I've had with newcomers and their families, and I go into a couple of them in the book, but like I said, I'm still learning. And a number of my students at the high school level, I'm finding are coming in as unaccompanied minors. Like, how challenging is that? And again, non-judgmentally, because we all are just doing the best for our families, the best we can. And sometimes we find that, humans, educators might say, why is that kid sent here with no adult? Why is that child in this situation? Why is that child living alone in someone's room? You know, I also find that one of the big challenges that our students and their families face would be health challenges. So whether it's a health challenge of the child or a member of the family, and that's kind of challenging for us to support as well. But again, like learning a ton and being like really reflective enough to know that no, I don't know everything. Might I have resources or connections that might help me, help or assist a family in ways that maybe they just aren't familiar with because they aren't familiar with the area or the supports that we have? Sure. But ensuring that I'm a better listener than speaker when it comes to my students and their families, that's probably one of the first lessons I learned as an educator of multilingual learners.
From what you just said, I'm gathering that a lot of the real life stories have to do with these situations,
Yeah.
basically, that your students have expressed or that you realize about some of your students, and then kind of helping educators to empathize and understand more about some of these newcomers that are in their classes. So I wanted to ask you, I know that the first chapter of this book is titled, "What are the ABCs of MLs?" And this explains the meanings of all of the acronyms to describe the various groups of language learners. For example, there was like DLL, EB, DB, and I thought it was really an interesting discussion, right? I mean, I thought that was a very interesting chapter to have. And I would like some insight from you as to what made you decide to begin your book with this chapter.
So I think it's important to have shared vocabulary. And sometimes, and just as well as everybody else, a lot of times these acronyms change. So some of those I might be using different ones now than when I was writing the book. But to kind of just provide that information at the get-go, let's have some shared vocabulary. Let's have some understanding of not only the acronyms, but we know that sometimes our language shapes our perception of things. The fact that we would have DLLs, dual language learners, that is something that we consider to be important enough to have a separate, quote, subgroup of multilingual learners. These little babies who are learning languages all at the same time. So really important. And I kind of embrace that as a teacher of multilingual learners and a teacher of teacher like certification candidates. You have to have that common language. You have to have those discussions. And when we do book studies with this book, this is really something that I kind of like stop and I say, is there anything that you think might be perhaps not as asset based as you would like? Is there anything that maybe you didn't realize that would be something for us to talk about? And even talking about the different types of models of programs and the different types of services. So yeah, that shared language for sure is so important when we're talking about our field.
Right. And it all goes back to perspectives again and individual stories, right? Because,
Absolutely.
the acronyms represent different groups of students, right? Who are having different types of experiences that need to be addressed in different types of ways, right? So, in terms of the situations that you've faced with your newcomers, what would you say is one of the toughest? Because I'm assuming, I mean, I know that you're not in K through 12 right now, but I'm assuming that you have had experience with newcomers. And so, what is one of maybe the toughest situations that you've been faced with, and how did you end up managing that?
Yeah, no, and I kind of wrapped up my K to 12 experience last week. So it's all pretty recent to me.
Oh,
So yeah,
oh,
so
okay.
I've been kind of continually keeping up with the students who, are coming our way and like I said, the unaccompanied minors and things like that. So I think other than the medical, because the medical challenges, and obviously I have, the only knowledge I have of medical things are the things that, I've gone through with my own family. But so that would be number 1 would be, like, medical issues that these families sometimes they come to us because they have medical issues, and they're just seeking answers and assistance. So that would be one. I have at the high school level, I have had the challenges of students who are supporting themselves, students for whom, their journey here was very traumatic, students who are living with extended family members who perhaps they'd never met, really very difficult situations. And also navigating with the content area teachers who don't understand why that child cannot stay after school to make up a test. That child, we finish school at 1:45. That child works at his job at 2 o'clock. So no. And those, like I have teenagers and um, my 2 older teenagers do have jobs and their jobs are buy things for themselves. I do not count on their jobs to pay the mortgage or to put food on the table. And the responsibilities that these children have in terms of pure survival is really it's so challenging for them, and it's challenging for me as someone who sits in the place of advocacy to ensure equity in their education that no, they cannot come after school to make up a test. Or perhaps there might be an issue with attendance. Or we have to ensure that should they be eligible for free and reduced lunch, that is something that we support the families with. So lots of challenging things with our newcomers, learning something new every day, stepping aside from my own perspective and say, because a lot of times we do think like the way we did things or the way that we do things is the best. It's not. It's not the best for everybody. So that's a challenge as well. But yeah, like really fighting the fight for these students. Equity comes in many different ways and to be flexible to the point where we say, look, I understand what responsibilities that these students have on their shoulders. And when I worked with the little, that would be more of supporting the families because sometimes these, younger students, they might have been born in our community, but the families might be very new to the community as well. So I found that one of the bigger challenges when I was working with, K to 2, K to 3 would be helping the families navigate the educational system, helping the families support literacy and language development. And really, our educational system in the United States really is different from so many other places, and not better, not worse, just different. And sometimes people need assistance in navigating. I know, like, sometimes sending your child to school might be like you're sitting there with your heart on your sleeve. You have no idea what you're sending your kid to, and supporting parents and supporting families in that way as well. So definitely challenges across the board. For
Right. Okay. And I like that everything that you basically said ties back into this idea of perspectives once again, and how the majority of us just see things through our own lens. And it's, why wouldn't you stay after school to
Yeah,
complete this exam? Not realizing, okay, this person comes from just a completely different situation where that's not something that they can do, right?
right. Oh,
That's
yeah.
not really something in their wheelhouse, right? And so I like that you did that. And I also really love that you gave us a comparison from your personal life, from your children, and what their reality is versus what some of your students' realities are, which is completely different. And so putting on those different lenses in order to bring in different, I guess, different reflections, right? Putting on different
Sure.
lenses to bring in different reflections in order to really understand what's happening in your educational space is very important. So now, Denise, you've written about and co-authored about 5 different publications. So which one would you say that you are proudest of?
I am proud of Voices. That was my first foray into writing, and I didn't know if I could do it. And could I walk the fine line between advocating and amplifying voices and kind of almost like supplementing voices? And I don't want to supplement voices. I think we really learn from the different experiences of our students. There are so many teachers who have read this book and said, I have no idea that people really experience that. So I'm super proud of that. I
Mm.
did a passion project with 2 of my former co-teachers, which was the bilingual children's book, Ben and the Amazing Animal Adventure, which,
Mhm.
was so fun, and I'm so proud of
Mm.
that. And yeah, and I've done a couple other co-authoring pieces with other people. I'm working on a new book right now with Dr. Carrie Orange Jones, who is a fellow Rutgers alumna, and it's a book for new teachers, and we are addressing, like, multilingual learners and empowering ourselves and being an equity innovator and talking about avoiding a deficit mindset, and it's all those things that we've really thought that student teachers, novice teachers, veteran teachers might need to really have these discussions. So, yes, we talk about managing behaviors positively and lesson plans and things like that, but it kind of goes beyond that because today's educator really needs something beyond classroom management. So, yeah, no, so I have a lot of fun things going on, and I'm finding
Great.
my voice as well.
Nice. Thank you for sharing about your upcoming work. And I love this term, equity innovator. That's
That's
fantastic.
what we're doing.
Now, I'm going to go back to an article that you wrote titled A Place for Everyone: Inclusion for Multilingual Learners for the NJ TESOL and NJBE Annual Voices Journal. What I found very interesting in this particular article is the 10 Commandments of Inclusion. So I just want to talk a little bit about a couple of those. Now, I'm not going to read all 10. I'm just going to read 4 that I would like you to maybe expand on, or just that I found interesting. Okay. So the 10 commandments of inclusion, ladies and gentlemen. Okay. So number 4 is all learners belong. All teachers belong. And I would particularly like you to expand on the second part of this statement because, there's often talk of including all students, but rarely do we see or hear a lot of rhetoric about the lack of inclusiveness for certain teachers in this field.
100%. And I found that if I went into a classroom as an in-class support teacher or in-class resource teacher for my students, I knew that if my student didn't perceive me to be an equal educator in that class, that was going to affect their own view of themselves. So that, number one, anytime I was participating in a support situation, whether it was high school algebra, 7th grade science, 5th grade gen ed, I really, that was like the non-negotiable is that, first of all, I am an equal teacher in this room. I might only be here for certain parts of the class, or I might be here certain days of the week. But when I come in, the perception of my role is a direct reflection on how my students feel. So if my students feel that I am, a helper teacher, or if my students feel that I am a guest, or that I don't have full feelings of belonging and representation in that class, they're going to internalize that to themselves. Also, like, I am an educator of every child in that class. Even the ones that are not on my own roster. So that's important as well to, kind of integrate the teachers within the class and integrate all of the students within the class. Nobody is a guest.
Okay. Now, I also want to touch base on this next one. So, the objectives are the same for all learners. The manner in which different learners achieve the objectives may vary.
Mhm.
I just think that, of course, this is also very important and something that is often discussed in terms of learning styles, etc. Then that was number 5. And then number 8, no learners are marginalized
Mm.
geographically, academically, or socially in the class. So when I first read that, I thought that this should be expanded to not only in the class,
In the
but in
whole
the
school.
school period,
Mhm.
just thinking of the educational experience holistically. But the next commandment basically covers that idea because commandment number 9 says diversity is valued and celebrated in class and in the school community. So that was then covered in that next commandment. So, what was kind of the inspiration for these commandments of inclusion?
So again, like having that common language, having that common expectation. Perhaps if we don't say, your MLs should not be in the back corner. Like they should be alongside all of their peers. They should be creating relationships with people who, might be someone that they could play with on the playground, or they might sit with them at lunch. And if we focus on language as a barrier, we can't do that. So language is not a barrier. And kind of providing the pathways for engagement and for connections and for communication among all of our students, that's going to be the game changer for all of them. And it's not kindness to, include any specific group. It's kindness to everybody. And everybody benefits from that in the classroom, throughout the school. And in terms of the objectives, just because we might have preconceived notions about if students might have, missed things in previous education, or if someone, I hate this, is low because of either their language or their diversity in their school experiences. All students are entitled to learn grade relevant concepts. Because if someone's in my third or second grade classroom and I determine that they should not have access to that because they missed other foundational skills in my view, they'll never catch up. Then if they're not doing second grade skills then in third grade, they're still going to be behind. So they need access to the same thing that their other peers, their general education peers, their native English speaking peers, their, the children who are, in the same grade as them, they need access to the same things if we're going to provide an equitable education. If we don't do that, they're never going to catch up. So,
Right.
yeah, not only is it important to look at the ways that we give access, it's also the things that we give access to.
Mm. So I want to take us kind of out of the classroom in terms of students and
Mhm.
go back to your job as a
Yeah.
teacher educator. So now you wrote an article titled Holistic Professional Learning in Times of Crisis, which is a study of how teachers received professional development during the COVID-19 pandemic. And in it, you mentioned that PD needs to be tailored to teachers' specific needs, so targeted, intentional, and including follow up sessions in order to improve teaching efficacy. Now, I particularly like that you included the notion of follow up sessions
Yeah.
because too often we receive PD on a topic that's deemed necessary by the administration, but then those sessions are like one hit wonders
Mhm.
and the topic isn't addressed in a formal way again. So, post pandemic, as a teacher trainer, can you describe what an effective PD session looks like?
So that study that I did with Carly Spina, who is like amazing. And we both went out of our comfort zone with this for sure. And we gathered information from three different, not levels of educators, but like people who identified as administrators, people who identified as mid level, like instructional coaches, teacher leaders, and then like classroom teachers. And we did have a number of multilingual learner teachers or specialists who responded to it, which I thought just added like a phenomenal layer of a voice to this. But yeah, no one and done, because I know, and as teachers, if we know that this is going to be just like the check off the checklist, the engagement is not going to be there. So I have been doing some really cool consulting and coaching in districts where it's a year-long, contract where I'm not in there all the time, but I go in, during their PLCs, their professional learning community meetings, or their grade level meetings, or I go in during their faculty meetings, or I go in, and this might be the most powerful way to do this, but I go in and I go into their classrooms, and we have on the spot, coaching and modeling and on the spot like conversations. Oh, do you see this? This is awesome what you're doing. And let me explain why and let's build on this. And so to make it really authentic, um the teacher coach or the consultant really has to know the district well. And that doesn't mean that
Hmm.
you can't have someone from outside come, but it has to be someone that's willing to learn and listen. And that follow-up and that actual authentic in the classroom support, that's huge. But yeah, no one and done. What is it? We have to follow up with fidelity, and listen to the teachers, listen to the educators, because a lot of times I might go in and I might think that they need this, this, and this, but they will tell me differently. And I appreciate that, you know?
So, I mean, specifically, you mentioned that This type of professional learning builds the educator's confidence
Mhm.
in teaching the content through different modalities and will positively influence other factors. So we know that an inspired and confident teacher leads to an inspired and confident student. So this all comes together, right? This all comes together full circle. The second to last question that I'm going to ask you now is, of course, where people can find information about your work. You already shared that you have an upcoming book, but if you could just repeat that once again for our listeners. And if there's anything else that you would like to share with us in terms of things that you have in the works.
Yeah, so that's the big baby that's in the works. That's through Corwin Publishing, and that's going to be available, like, late winter in 2025.
Hmm.
We are
And can you repeat the name of it? What
right
is?
now, it's helping teachers thrive in the first years. That's kind of the working title of it, but, yeah, there
Ah.
will be, a lot of stuff on the social media and things like that,
Mhm.
talking about, when we have the full title and everything, but definitely looking into this, like we were talking about, the holistic professional learning, looking at it through the lens of what today's teachers really need to empower themselves, to empower their students. Yeah, and you can find my other books on Amazon, or in your local small bookstore, which we love as well. We love to support small business. So,
Okay, great. And so the final question, which I ask every guest who appears on the Our Burning Questions podcast, is what burning question should today's educators consider in order to improve their service to the L community?
what ways can I reflect on myself to better provide equitable experiences for my students and their family? So, not like what ways can my students change? What can I change within me? What could I how can I improve myself to really meet the needs of all learners?
Beautiful. Okay, ladies and gentlemen, Dr. Denise Furlong, thank you so much for your time today and for taking the time to talk about all of these very pressing and important issues for today's educators here on Our Burning Questions.
Thank you so much for having me. Oh, it's such a delight to see you again. Yay, nice tea saw.
Thank you for tuning in to Our Burning Questions, produced by Midstate Arborn at OCM BOCES. If you would like to learn more about today's guest or any of the resources we discussed, please visit Midstate Arbon's webpage at ocmboces.org. That's ocmboces.org. Join us next time where we hope to answer more of your burning questions.